We're explaining the different meanings of the two Mishkan in the Pasuk. We say, Eile Pekudei HaMishkan, Mishkan HaEdus. So we translated it in different ways. And before we translated right before we translated it as Mishkan would be talking about the Avodah of Tzadikim, Kim Torah mitzvahs, and Mishkan Ha'edus is talking about Shuvah. So therefore, Mishkan, Eleb Kudei HaMishkan, that's the level of Tzadikim. That's the level that you bring down through Maisim Tovim. You become a Mishkan to Hashem. Then when it says Mishkan Ha'edus, that's talking about the level of Teshuvah. And now the Rebbe is going to say that even in Teshuvah, we have two levels. See, so it keeps on going more details and more details. Before it says mitzvah saseh, mitzvah loisa said tshuva and tzaddikim, and now he's going to say that even in tshuva itself we have two madregas. We have a madrega of tshuva ilah, the higher level of teshuva, and we have the level of tshuva tato, the lower level of teshuva. Teshuva means toshuv K. We bring back the K. The K. So you have the upper Hey, Yud K. You bringing back the K to the Yud, and then you have tshuva tato bringing back the Vav K, bringing back the K to the Vav. Through tshuva, you take away that separation, and toshuv K, you bring back the K to its source. So the avodah to become a Mishkan Hashem can be translated through the level of Toshuv K, the K Tato, that's Eile Pekudei HaMishkan. Then you become a Mishkan. And through the level of Mishkan HaEdus, that becomes to the level of Tshuvei Law. And the Rebbe is going to explain in Avodas Hashem how much of a Mishkan you become. What kind of a Mishkan through the two levels of Tshuva. Let's look inside. V'hinei gam b'tshuva atzma yeshnom shnei ha'inyonim d'midas ha'moichin. Within Tshuva itself, we have the two ideas of midas ha'moichin. As we've spoken the whole time, that you have the Yud K, which is the level of moichin, and we have the Vav K, which is the level of midas. We have the level of Bina Moichin, and we have the level of Malchus. So Mishkan Stam or Mishkan Ha'edus. So within Tshuva, you have the Mishkan Stam, Eilab Kudei HaMishkan, and then you have Mishkan Ha'edus. The Tshuva Tato, the level of Tshuva Tato, which is Toshuv Kei Tato Lahavov, the lower level of Tshuva. That is to bring back the lower Hey from the Yud Kevav Ke Lehavov to the Vav Hibimidas. That is the emotions. That is the Midas. Utshuva Ilo, and the higher level of Tshuva, Toshuv Ke Ilo Lahayud, to bring back the Hey Ilo, the higher Hey, the Yud K, to that K, to bring it back to the Yud. That is in the Moichin. What does this mean, becoming a Mishkan through the level of Midas or through the level of Moichin? So we can explain in Avodas Ha'odom. When do you become a Mishkan to the Midas, and when do you become a Mishkan to the Moichin? The Teshuvah Tato, he be'iker b'negeya l'ha'avodah the Torah mitzvahs. The lower level of Teshuvah, bringing back the K to the Vav, to the lower level, is mainly b'negeya l'ha'avodah the Torah mitzvahs, as it's associated with the service of Torah mitzvahs. Sur me'rav asei toiv. We have to stay away from bad do good. Those are Torah mitzvahs. Hainu shehadilug shebetshuva tato hu benegeya lahametzius shaloi. That means that jump, because we said tshuva is a jump. The jump of tshuva tato is with matters that are associated to his mitzias. The whole idea of tshuva, we said before, you leave your mitzias. That the tshuva, you change and you go away from your mitzias, but you're going away from your mitzias, tshuva, with association with things that are your mitzias, are connected to mitzias. And that's why that's included in the level of midas. Midas are a mitzias versus the moichin, which is bitl, as the Rebbe has explained earlier. With tshuva law, but the higher level of tshuva, hilo hoshiv, is not with regards to mitzvahs, Torah mitzvahs. The upper level of tshuva is lahoshiv es hanafshe l'mekoira, to bring back, return his soul to its source. Kimoi shahoisom yuchedes ba yizbarech betachlis hayichud beterem shenafcha, just like it was united in him, blessed, total unity before he blew. Atonafachtabi, the Eibishter blew the neshama in me. So there's a whole hishtalshlus that the neshama goes down. Tshuva law means to bring the nefesh. It's not Torah mitzvahs. That is to return the soul, to bring it back to the source. It was miyuchedes b'tachlis hayichud. It was totally united in the neshama before the Eibishter blew the neshama into the person. It was united with the Eibishter. Teshuvah ilah means to bring it down the neshama to that level that it was before. By returning the soul, he goes out, and it's negated from its existence, from its entity. It's no longer the entity of the neshama. It becomes united with the Ein Sof. And that's why the real bittul b'metzias, is a moichin. Midas is a metzias. The moichin, as the Rebbe said, that is the level of bittul. So based on this idea of the two levels of teshuvah, teshuvah tato and teshuvah ilah, in which teshuvah tato is associated with metzias, with midas. Teshuvah law is associated with moichin, level of bitl b'metzias, of moichin. Shnei ha'inyonim shebemishkan hem gam b'teshuvah atzma. So the two aspects in the mishkan, mishka elu pkuda mishkan ha'edus hem gam b'teshuvah atzma. That's in teshuvah itself. Mishkan stam mishkan, not mishkan edus, mishkan stam, just teshuvah tato. That's the low level of tshuva. Mishkan ha'edus tshuva ilah. That is the higher level of tshuva. Basically, when the person does tshuva tato, he becomes a mishkan. When he does tshuva ilah, then he becomes mishkan ha'edus. That's when he reaches to the level of moichin, the level of bina, which is the level of bitl b'metzias. So we're always trying to explain now the two interpretation. What does it mean that Moshe counted? Is it referring to the Mishkan HaEdus that Moshe counted? Or it also refers to Ele Pekudei HaMishkan, that the first Mishkan is also Pokad Al Pi Moshe. So the explanation that in the two Perushim, so we can explain. The Rebbe always explains the Poked of Moshe in each time that he changes the meaning of Mishkan HaEdus. So the Rebbe says we can explain like this. The main idea that it was Poked Moshe which Moshe is bittul b'metzias, like he said, v'nachnu mo, where is the level of total negated of any metzias hu b'tshuvei lo. That's in the level of tshuvei lo, which is mishkan ha'edus. So that's why the second pshat is pukad mishkan ha'edus asher pukad up in Moshe. But yet we also have the other interpretation, mishkan ha'edus also al pi Moshe. But still, this is also connected to Eilab Kuda Mishkan. Even not Mishkan Ha'edus, but the Rebbe said before, a mikra yetz b'dei pshutoi. Ki al yidei tshuva ilo, gam ha-tshuva tatoi ba'il fenali yeser. Because through the tshuva ilo, so when there is pukad, Alpi Moshe with regards to Mishkan Ha'edus, that impacts that the Pukad Alpi Moshe is also the Eilab Kudah HaMishkan. Gam HaTshuva Tatoi Ba'ifan Yeser, that it's also on a higher level. Okay, so the Rebbe explains here that within Tshuva we have the two levels of Tshuva Ilo and Tshuva Tato, which is the level of Mishkan Stam and Mishkan Ha'edus, Tshuva Ilo, which you get the level of Mechin, level of Midas, and Pukad Api Moshe is the second level, the Mishkan Ha'edus, the Bittul B'Metzias, but eventually it also is Pukad Api Moshe for the Mishkan, because the Tshuva Ilo impacts the Tshuva Tato, that it's on a higher way. So now the Rebbe goes in Ches to explain the taich of the Alter Rebbe, how this fits in. So right now we're talking about becoming a Mishkan to Hashem on various different high levels, in the levels of Tshuva, and the highest level of Tshuva, to the level of Tshuva Ilo. So now we can also associate this to what the Alter Rebbe says, that the word Pekudei represents Yichud. There is the level of Pekudei, which is intimacy, so to speak, with the Eibishter becomes like the relationship, the intimacy from a husband and a wife. That intimacy is represented between Hashem and the Jewish people, that they become in a level of union which is higher. B'chlal, we have, as Rabbi explains, the three obligations from the husband to the wife, which is he must take care of her food, he must take care of her garment, and must take care of the intimacy, which is she'era, ksusa ve'inosa. So she'era, the food, that's the lowest level. Kisus's garment is makif. That's our connection with Hashem. But inosa, the intimacy, that's the highest level. So here we say, Eile Pekudei. The Pekudei, this is the intimacy. So now that we're explaining the level of Tshuva Ilo, that we bring down the level of Mishkan, even in Tshuva Ilo, we understand this also with the taich of the Alter Rebbe. The Pekudei, who gam meloshem pekide v'yichud. It's also from the language remembering and union and intimacy. K'moi brings the obligation, chayiv odom lifkedes ishtay. A person is remembered before he goes on to the road. A person needs to remember his wife, be intimate with his wife before he goes on the road. The Rebbe will explain it very interesting in a minute about before the Eibishter sent us into Golus. We see by the Kruvim that they appeared to be like a husband and a wife together, because while the Eibishter went on the road, it was the obligation of his Ishtar. Explained elsewhere, the three obligations, these three, the food, garments, and the oino, the she'era mozein hu hamshocha shemislabeshet v'kli hamakabel. When we talk about food, that represents that hamshocha, what extends, that dresses up in the vessels of the recipient, which means what the Yidden can receive. That's the connection that the makabel gets. Kesusa, the garment, levush, hu hamshocha shebechinas makiv. That's a extents that comes down in a surrounding way, shalamayla mipnimis, which is higher than the inner. The oinoso who amshochas ha'etzem. Oinoso is bringing down the essence. Shalemailo gam mahamakiv de levush, which is even higher than the makif of the levush, which means the highest level, the most intimate level, the greatest connection with Hashem is the oinoso. Kisusa is a connection in a makif, and she'era is in a primis where the makabel can receive it. Well, the Hoysif, so the Rebbe says to add that the advantage is not just that it comes down in a higher level, but the advantage is that the revelation is also not with a garment. So the Eibishter gives the essence, that's the Einosa, but also the recipients gets the essence. And the Rebbe brings it interesting from the halacha that the halacha, let's say inside, to add, it's not only as it touches the amshacha above, that Einosa brings down the essence, unlike Makif or the level of Mosin, Elogam b'negel Yisrael, but it also is touches how the Yidden receive it. They get this amshocha not through a garment. They get it directly, without, just like the Rebbe is going to say, just like the hamshocha of Einosa, the intimacy, comes direct without a garment, so the Yidden receive it without a garment. And the Rebbe explains the saying of our sages. They say like this: there was a Dezeu Shomer Azal. Our rabbis say, Omer, if one argues, he says, Ani bevigdi vihi bevigdo, yotzi v'yitin ksuba. If a person says, I want to be intimate, but I have my clothes and she has her clothes, you can't live v'yitin ksuba. Why does it say both? The clothing is the garment. A garment, if you want that union between Hashem, both things that the saying says. Hashem has no garment, comes the essence, and the person, the Yisrael, receive it without a garment. They don't have the garment either. Because that's why the halacha is that if the shlilas ani bevigdi, when we're rejecting that you can't have the hamshocha through I in a garment, which means that the Eibishter should come down through a garment, who sham shocha de l'mayla b'lilavush, that means it comes down from above, there's no garment. V'shlilas hi bevigdo, and that we're rejecting that it can't be with a garment, that she, the recipient, should have the garment, who shekabolas hagilu shaloy al yidei levush, that how do you receive that revelation not through a garment? So here we're talking now about such a powerful connection between the Yidden and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to the extent we call this the level of intimacy, a level of yichud. But in the Likutei Torah, it talks about a connection that comes through Torah mitzvahs, not this higher connection, which is the essence, the etzem. The Pirush Likutei Torah be'elem pekudei mishkan. This interpretation of Likutei Torah explains the elem pekudei mishkan. Pekudei loshen pekudei v'yichud. He teaches pekudei comes from loshen, from remembering and union. But this comes as a follow-up to what he explains there. Mishkan ha'edus. What is Mishkan ha'edus? Hu hamshocha sh'alidei mitzvos loisaseh. We learned earlier that the Mishkan that you become, the Mishkan ha'edus, that comes down through the loisaseh shalemaylo mi'islapshus b'kelim, which is beyond dressing up in kelim. Mitzvahs asay is a positive. We do something. That means that mitzvah is dressed up in an action. Mitzvahs loisase cannot come down in an action. We fulfill it by not doing because it's above higher than dressing up in kelim. That's mishkan haedus. Pekode hamishkan, the regular, the stammi mishkan, who hamshocha shalidei mitzvahs asay. That's hamshocha of a mitzvahs asay shemislabeshes bekelim, that dressed up in kelim, and which would be bechinas she'eda shelamato gam bechinas kesusa. That would be mozin, which is lower than the makif, than kesusa, than the garment. So basically, loisase, the mishkan gets from the level of kesusa, which is the level of makif, and mitzvah saseh, which dresses up mozin mislapes bekelim. That's the idea of Sheira. So how come if we're talking about the level of mitzvahs loisase, which is Sheira and Kisuso, how are we talking about Pikude, about Inosa? And still we're saying this is the Pekida, remembering from Meloshin Pekicha that union, which is a much more higher, as the Rebbe said, but it's higher. Inosa is the Etzem, much higher than She'era and Kisusa. So how does Eile Pekude fit with this beer over there in the Kutatera itself? We also have to understand Hakesher, the Pirush Rashi, also to understand the connection of Rashi's interpretation. Mishkan Shnei Pa'amim. Rashi says, why does it say Mishkan? It says Hu remes lemigdosh and ismashkin b'shnei churbonim. That hints to the Beis Hamikdash that became a mashkin. Mishkan is from the lashon collateral during the two destructions, ala v'nisayim shel Yisrael, because of the sins of the Yidden. The Mishkan wasn't just destroyed, but it was taken away as a mashkin. The Eibishter is holding on as a collateral till the Yidden will do tshuva. So how does this mashkin, which is not talking about a destruction, how does that connect to this great yichud of mashkin that we become a hamshocha? This in Mishneh Churbanim Alav in the same Shel Yisrael. How does this coincide with the interpretation of the Likutei Torah? Mishkan Shnei Pa'amim Hem Hamshochas Nailas B'Yoser. These two Mishkanas are great Hamshochas, when in the essence that represents the Churban. What comes down through the positive, the Mishkan Stam, and the Mishkan Ha'edus, the Hamshocha that comes through Mitzvahs Loisaseh, and also up to the Pekuda Mishkan. The Alter Rebbe brings down the Pekuda Mishkan, Pekuda Meloshe Pekuda V'yichud. How does this fit with the Pashtup Pshat of the destruction? So we can say in the explanation, through the Mishkan that was an atonement for the sin of the Egel, because the Eibishter gave them the Mishkan to show that they were forgiven. That was a kapara for the sin of the Egel. Nizgale. So once we got the Mishkan, Shakavona de Lamaila b'Maisa Egel melachatchila. So then it was revealed that what was the intention of above in making of the Egel. They should reach level of tshuva. Gave them the Mishkan. So to begin with, why did the Eibishter orchestrate it in such a way that the Yidden should make the Egel so that they should get the Mishkan? That means it was revealed that the Avera was for the purpose of tshuva, so they should get the Mishkan. So the same thing, just like with the Cheta Egel, a kapore, from when it was the Chatchila later on to get to Shuva. So the same thing is when the Geil is Esha Migdash and is Mashkin Shnei Pa'amim Al Yidei Abenisayim Shel Yisrael. The fact that the Mishkan went taken a collateral twice because of the sins of the Yidden. Sha'akavona Bazehi. So what's the intent? B'chdei sheyagiu l'maylos hatshuva, so that the Yidden should reach the level of tshuva. And through the tshuva, yuchzar achar kach hamashken liYisrael, this collateral will be returned to the Yidden. They'll get it back on even on a more elevated level than it was before the destruction for the Chut. So this is the mashkin, the golus. We know it's not just a punishment. It's not just avedus. It's to reach the level of teshuva, to get it back on a higher level. Hine mahamailis shebetshuva legabe ha'avoda dekim ateiru mitzvah. What is one of the advantages of tshuva measured next to regular Torah mitzvahs observant? The fact that a yid does tshuva, even after he experienced a separation that took place, the sins separated him from Hashem, as the pasuk says, the sins separated. So tshuva means after you experience a separation, you separated from Hashem. A person was separated from Hashem through the sin. Is hulifi. So how is that? Hulifi shat tshuva. So where does tshuva come from? How do you return when you were distant? Shat tshuva bo me'etzem haneshama. Tshuva comes from the essence of the soul. She kusheres tomid ma'atzmus, which is always tied to atzmus. So bekivon she'etzem haneshama hi etzem gam de koiches hageluyim. The essence of the neshama. It's not just the essence of the neshama, it's the essence of the revealed. So what the person does revealed, there's an etzem, there's the etzem of his soul. L'chein, al yidei ha'teshuva, when a person does teshuva, it impacts gam kiyum ha'toyro mitzvah shemitzad koiches ha'geluyim da neshama. Also, when the person does Torah mitzvahs, which come from the inner, the revealed part of the soul. After tshuva, is beyond measure and limitation, because once you tapped into the etzem haneshama and once you did teshuva, that etzem is revealed in the regular maisim tovim, that they become limitless in a way of no limitation. This is the connection between the two ideas in Pekudi HaMishkan. We're saying Pekudi Meloshin Pekida v'Yichud, which is the level of intimacy, remembering, and union between a Yid and the Eibishter, and Umishka Meloshin Mashkin, and then Rashi said that Mishkan is a level of collateral. Ki al Yidei Hatshuva Habo al Yidei Shenis Mashkin HaMigdosh, because through tshuva that the people do, through the fact that the Mishkan was nismashkin, misgalis etzem haneshama, then you get the etzem, then you get the pekida. V'al yidei zeh gam kiyum ha'torah mitzvahs hilamayla ba'agbola. So this impacts that also the Torah mitzvahs is higher than limitation. V'ad be'oifun de pekudei meloshin pekida v'yichud, to the extent that it becomes pekudei, remembering in union, Yisrael v'kuchabricha kulachad, the Yidden and the Eibishter are all one. Basically, the mashkin, the mishkan, that it was collateralized, brings to the level of teshuva. The level of teshuva is the etzem hanefesh. The etzem hanefesh impacts everything. So therefore, through the Alter Rebbe talked first about mitzvahs haseh, mitzvahs lo haseh, but that's connected with the level of Pekudei, because the Pekudei impacts the Torah mitzvahs later on, because Mishkan, the Mashkin, brought out the level of Tshuva. The Tshuva brought out the level of the essence. The essence impacts the Maisim Tovim, the mitzvahs haseh, mitzvahs lo haseh, and it makes it l'mayla magbola. So that becomes in a way of Pekida in connection. That's why this is all connected at also the level of Yichud. The Rebbe says we can add here the Alter Rebbe brings the language that how do we know about this union, the intimacy? It's called Pekida. He brings it from the statement Shom Razal Chayiv Odom Lifkei Des Ishkoi. Person is obligated to remember to be intimate with his wife. There's a lot of places where the word pikida is used in relationship to describe the union, the intimacy. So why does the Alter Rebbe bring specifically this statement? So there's a reason for that. Who? Because in this saying of our sages, he talks of this talks about the obligation to remember his wife, to be intimate at the time when he's going on the road. So what does he hint Alter Rebbe by bringing this down? The noise of law in the Pekudi Mishkan, that in addition to the idea of Pekudi Mishkan, to remembering through the mashkin, shakavone bozeh, that what is the intent of the Mishkan, Migdash nishmashkin he, that why was the Migdash collateralized? So through tshuva later on there will be, which is lost love in the future, hayichud, when the Mishkan is, when the Beis Hamikdash is rebuilt, Pekida ba'ifanayle yoser, it will be the level of Pekida on a higher level. So it was nishmashkin in order to come to Pekida. Gam b'shozu atzmo. So this is the hint why the Rebbe brings this down, why the Alter Rebbe brings down this. At that time itself, k'shenishmashkin hamikdash. Not only when it's going to come back on a higher level, but at this time, when the Mishkan is nishmashkin, hoya hayichud. So there was that union between that Pekida took place. Is explained elsewhere. Mashamar Razal, the sages tell us that it was something very strange happened when they destroyed the Beis Hamikdash. When the Goyim entered into the Heichel, into the Beis Hamikdash, they saw that the cherubs, the two kruvim on the Orin, they were wrapped in each other's lap, like a man and a wife. The L'cheda Tamua. When you have him wrapped around with each other, that represents that shows on the great love, the dearness between the Eibishter and the Yidden, like the love, like the dearness of a man and his wife. So that represented by the fact that the Murim were in such a position. But when they entered into the Heichel, it was a time of destruction. It was against the love. Why did they see all of a sudden the kruvim ma'urim zebazeh, ba'bir bazeh? The kivon shebizman hagolus knesses Yisrael he, since during the time of Golus, the Jewish people, as ki isha shaholach ba'ilel dinas hayam, as it says, it's like a woman whose husband is going overseas, which means the Eibishter, we're still married to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and we're still with the Eibishter, we're still connected. But the Eibishter is not here right now, he went overseas. L'chein, and therefore, so brilliant the Rebbe is putting this together. Lifnei yitziaseh shel ha'abal HaKadosh Baruch Hu l'derech, before the husband, before HaKadosh Baruch Hu goes out in the way, hoisa pekida, that's why he remembered them. That's why the Kurim was then Kimar Ish Veloyos, which means like a husband, like that's the pasuk that the Razal used there, like a man and his partner, that they are in an embrace, because that was the embrace the Eibishter gave before he sent us into Golus and before he left. That Pekida was in a hidden way. But openly there was the destruction, the Golus. So it's not a surprise why they saw this, because in essence there was a Pekida. And what's the purpose of this is? By the service in time of Golus. Especially through the service of tshuva, tiyeh hapekida begilui, that remembering, that union will be openly b'binyan Beis Hamikdash Shlishi, in the building of the third Beis Hamikdash. V'oz yuchzar gam hamashken, and then also the collateral will be returned. Hamishkan, Ha'edus, the Mishkan Mibebias Mashiach Tzidkenu B'Kodesh Mamash, with the coming of Mashiach Tzidkenu very soon. The Rebbe explains the interpretation of the Likutei Torah that Pekudei means the level of union. Seems to be such a high, powerful level. How does this fit with what the Alter Rebbe explained there, that Pekudei, that Mishkan is mitzvahs and mitzvahs loises, and the Rebbe brings out that the whole idea, and also with Rashi's Pirush, that Mishkan is the destruction of the Mishkan. And the Rebbe brings out the idea that after the level of Teshuvah, which comes through the Mashkin being taken, so that brings out the Mashkin, we actually get a higher level, because that was a atonement. The Mishkan is an atonement for the Egel, and therefore brings to the level of Tshuva, and the level of Tshuva impacts also everything that we do, and it impacts the mitzvahs leisas and mitzvahs aseh, and that's all comes from the Pekudei. And also the Rebbe explains that we still have that connection with the Eibishter even while we went out to Golus. That's why the appearance of that love of the Kruvim. And the Rebbe says this is all the destruction. In the destruction, there is the yichud between the, but now we see churban. But this is all for the intention of the coming of Mashiach Tzidkenu, the Migdash HaShlishi. Okay, some very powerful words here.
Yep. Yes. Thank you very much, Rabbi. Thank you very much. See you next time.